Okay. All right. We are recording. So thank you again to our wonderful panelists for not just being here, but for being flexible, for riding the wave that happened in the last couple of weeks that created the conditions for us to need to move the panel a couple weeks later, wanting to apologize to everybody who was planning on being there that Saturday. And, unfortunately, we had to move some stuff around, but I believe in divine timing. And so I do really trust that this is the right time for this conversation to happen. We're going to get started just by having me read some information about these panelists, the bios that I received from you all. But as I mentioned yesterday on the call, I would love to hear everything outside of this bio, right? Everything that gives you more context as a person, as an individual. Xochitl, I want you to introduce your child as well, because I don't believe that I have their bio, but we're going to go ahead and start with Cindy. And I'm going to go ahead and read the bio that I have for you, Cindy. Cindy Luquina is a dynamic force in sexual health education and advocacy with over a decade of experience. And as a queer bisexual woman, Cindy is on a mission to revolutionize healthy sexual practices. As a certified educator, their electrifying presentations empower audiences of all backgrounds. They fearlessly tackle topics like consent, boundaries, STI prevention, and abortion access. Cindy is also a passionate advocate for social justice, fighting for reproductive justice, LGBTQ+ rights, and equity. Their expertise has earned recognition in the field. Join Cindy as they break down barriers and promote confidence in embracing sexuality. Cindy, you're a super chingona. We have a lot of mutuals and we've been in connection like here and there, just kind of sprinkled throughout the years. And so I was like, someday something's going to happen here. And so now you're here and I'm so excited that you are here. And so we're going to also read Xochitl's bio, if that's okay, Xochitl. Xochitl is a pansexual naturalized Latina, born in Mexico and raised in the USA, who grew up with a super traditional grandma who taught Xochitl how to be the woman of the house and cater to others versus yourself. College really allowed you to explore yourself and your sexuality. You came out in college and about 4 years ago to your extended family and your grandmother. Even though you've always been super real with yourself, coming out to your family of origin was scary. So I'm sure that we're going to get into that today also. And you say, but I'm so proud of me and I'm proud of you too. In your family dynamics with Junior, who is next to you, with people who people choose to love has been so normalized through our conversations, through your conversations, the books that you read and relationships. You are also currently an educator for Xochitl Brizuela, Spanish and more. As one of your careers, your classes focus on nonviolent communication and social justice, prioritizing knowing and connecting with ourselves to connect with the world. And I would love for you to introduce Junior in a second, but I'm going to go ahead and read Dallas's bio also. Dallas is a parent, healing and surviving child activist, and attorney. They live in a multi-generational household with an age difference of 90 years between the oldest and youngest Martinez. They are a volunteer in several spaces and founded Spectrum Resource Center, an LGBTQIA2S+ nonprofit centering intergenerational and intersectional events and experiences. Dallas is also an attorney for a statewide LGBTQIA2S+ civil legal aid nonprofit. He lives in Seattle, Washington, but spent most of his life in Dallas, Texas. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, Dallas. Thank you for being here, Cindy. Thank you for being here, Xochitl, and to our interpreters again, and to Maria in the background. I want to get this conversation started. I thought I had sent you all the questions. We met a little bit yesterday. Cindy, I know that you couldn't make it yesterday, but I always like to start off with ourselves as children, just to recognize the fact that those children still live within us. And so I would love to just hear some of your experiences growing up. One of the intentions that I have is to share, that there are children out there that might be relating to some of the experiences that you had. So I would love to just hear a little bit more about you as children, right? And about how maybe your identity started becoming something that you were reflecting on, and how that evolved. And so I would love to start with Cindy, if that's all right. And actually, Cindy, before I do that, I want Sochi to have the opportunity. I just said I want Sochi to introduce Junior. And so let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll come back to you and we'll kind of get the conversation started after that. But Sochi, would you be willing to introduce Junior? Junior, you can introduce yourself as well.
Yes, so this is Junior. His name is Junior Hernandez. He is 21. You want to say a little bit about yourself?
I'm going to college for culinary school. I don't know. I'm working as an educator right now, teaching kids swimming, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, he's been also just on his own like healing journey, right? I'm a single parent, but he's had contact with both sides. So he's had like a lot of extended family, and he originally went to Massachusetts about 2 years ago and decided that wasn't the place that was meant for him. So now he's back in Long Beach, here in Tongvaland, and going to Long Beach City College.
That's beautiful. It's so nice to meet you, Junior. Thank you for being here. Okay, so Cindy, how did you grow up? What was your experience? Tell us a little bit more about you as a little one.
Well, first I want to say thank you for having me here, and it's so nice meeting you all. And Junior, thank you for introducing yourself. I congratulate you on the culinary journey. That's amazing. So a little bit about myself growing up. So I grew up in Los Angeles, mostly the Valley. So like 818, if anybody's tuning in from 818, I'm currently in Maryland now, so Piscataway land. When I was little, I'm trying to think, like when I was little, I think it was just really hard for me growing up because my parents had me really young. They were teenagers. And so a lot of the time, there was a lot of parentification, right? Where I was mediating a lot of their relationship issues and that dynamic from a really young age. And from that, I think also just being a child survivor of domestic violence that went on for many, many years. I had a lot of really, a lot of turmoil growing up about just my own voice and what I could speak up about. And when I wasn't in that dynamic, I think I just loved the freedom of expressing myself. I loved, I think what most kids like is watching and listening to music, watching music videos, dressing up like the pop stars you see on TV, was really into like beauty and, I loved watching Michael Jackson and Prince and, all of those things. And my mom was like super into like Madonna and Paula Abdul. And so like, that was really fun to grow up with those experiences too. My family is very musical on both sides. So I grew up with a lot of cousins. That was a really beautiful thing too. And we were all really close in age. So anytime we all got together, that was super fun. And so I have all those young memories of when we were all together and we would get into mischievous things together, a bunch of travesuras and stuff like that. And then when we got a little bit older, then we got into other kinds of travesuras. But like as kids, I think it was just really fun to, go to family functions and go to barbecues and have fun and play at the park and, all that kind of stuff. So I am very much still in touch with being in nature, and that fulfills me as an adult today. And I think it's taken some time on my healing journey, but I look back and there's a lot more space for me to look back on fond memories versus just the hard things that we all go through.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Yeah, a lot of times when I ask questions about childhood, and Dallas, you've been through the series that I run, and I ask for people to reflect, and it's usually very complex, right? So there's really beautiful aspects of our childhood, and then there's challenging aspects of our childhood. And I think for someone who took the journey of healing that you all have taken, like there's been a lot to balance, right? There's been a lot of that grief and that celebration to balance. So thank you for starting us off, Cindy. Dallas, I would love to hear from you, and just kind of, what stands out to you about your childhood. What was it like growing up, and kind of how you were moving through into, your current self.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas in the 1980s. So politically, there was a lot going on there. I was a latchkey kid, also experienced adultification. I come from a divorced household. It was really interesting. My parents ended up living about 10 houses apart from each other to make sure that they were still both present in our lives. I'm a surviving child and sibling of violence, as I lost my brother in 1995 to gang violence. I was a closeted queer for most of my childhood that I can remember, and lost much of my spark early on because of that. But I did find refuge in mentorship, family connections, soccer, outdoor spaces. I learned to hike and go camping as a teenager, and really fell in love with that, and found a lot of comfort and sanctity in that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for starting us there also. Xochitl and Junior, I would love to hear from you as well. I know, Junior, I still consider you a youth, right? So, I still consider me a youth too. So, but I would love to hear from both of you, each of you, what was growing up like. Junior, I think, you add a really valuable perspective having Xochitl as a parent. And so I would love to hear from each of you what your experiences were growing up, and anything that stands out that you would like to make sure that you share during this opening portion.
Thank you everyone so far for sharing those beginnings. I think for me, I was born in Mexico, migrated here when I was 4. So I came with my grandparents. My grandmother was already here with aunts and uncles, and my dad was like going back and forth trying to finish, la universidad, like college down there, and then came here with us. But so I was separated from my mother because I was living with my mother in Mexico at 4, and since then I haven't had any contact with her, so I don't know my mother. I know she's still alive, but I've never met her. So I ended up moving here with my grandmother. So I lived with my grandmother, aunts, uncles, and it was, how we were talking about, just that multi-generational, household. Unfortunately, it wasn't a positive experience. I think how we were saying, just those different layers of like joys and hardships. And, my family all did like field work. And then when my dad came, he did a lot of construction. So it was like that on and off work type of thing. And he wasn't around a lot. And so we were raised by everybody. So everybody in the house, right, is like the parent, which made it really hard because there was things that some people were okay with and some people were not okay with. So I felt like for me growing up, the hard part was trying to figure out what was the right thing to do, just because I felt like I was constantly right and wrong, So there was things that my dad was like totally okay with us. Like my dad was very much go to school, do the best that you can do it, you can make it. And my grandmother on the opposite was, you're going to learn to clean, you're going to learn to cater to the male. Even my younger brother, like he was like, like a peer, even though he's like the youngest, he was a peer along with my father. And so when my dad would get home from like construction work, then we had to like take off his shoes and take off his socks and just kind of really cater to that. So for me, I felt like school was my escape. I was a total nerd, top of my class. I just felt like school was easy because you weren't right or wrong. You were just right if you followed the rules. And for me, I felt like that was really easy. School was easy because of that. So for me, I know as a way of not being wrong all the time, I joined a bunch of clubs and that sort of thing. So I was really active in school to get away from my household.
Yeah.
Also how some of us were saying, there's definitely sexual abuse in my past. emotional and physical abuse. And I've been doing a lot of work. When I went off to college, being away from that environment really allowed me to delve more into myself and allow that healing journey to start. I feel like I've been doing a lot of reparenting and, how do I want to be? And I had Junior when I was 20. So I was also a young parent. But I know when he started going to school at a child development center, it really shifted my paradigm, like my parenting, right? Like I did not want him to be raised the way I was raised. I wanted it to be different. And that really opened my eyes to that sort of thing. And he went to a school that also focused on like bilingualism and non-competitive and community. And so for me, those were all really, really important. But I guess he can share on that end of it. That's like my perspective, right? Because I became a single parent, but for me, community and the parents, I always tell them like, it wasn't just me who raised him, it was like la comunidad. And he agrees. We've talked about that. He's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I would love to. This is like a good entryway into your story, Junior, because it's like, okay, luego nació Junior, then Junior was born. And so I would love to hear just kind of your experience growing up and being surrounded with that community, but also just anything else that you might want to share as like really vital and important to the way that you were raised.
Yeah, I think like my mom was saying, coming to the United States, having not the greatest family dynamics in her life. In a similar sense, my dad's family dynamics were a lot hectic too. Having bringing down like the machismo from his side of the family coming down, and just a lot of the area that my dad grew up in, growing up in like East Los. So a lot of like gang ties and affiliations there. So it was interesting growing up, really close to my mom, really close to my dad, and like the inner family. But then the extended family was just, my mom didn't want no ties there. A lot of people on my dad's side of family, either in Mexico or, doing their own things that my parents didn't want me to be around. So definitely took a lot of strength within, the closer inner circles. And then like my mom was saying, her being a single parent after, my parents' divorce, taking up like 2, maybe even 3 jobs at a time. So sometimes there would be, nights or days that I wouldn't see her. And, my friends would be taking care of me. And I found a lot of refuge in that. And like she's saying, like the community, because there was a really big aspect of that. So, I'm really thankful for the friends and family that I made, through that. I think going a little more forward, I think the school that she was talking about definitely focused on bilingualism, community, but also like social activism. I learned a lot about that. And even when I went to like, a public high school, I was like, you guys don't know like specifics about Martin Luther King, like Dolores Huerta? Like, I was like, what do you mean? Like, I was so like taken aback that people were like so eager to learn about social justice, but didn't know like, enough about it because it just isn't something that's like normalized to teach. Um, so it was definitely interesting there. Um, yeah, I think just growing up, finding strength in like community has been a big standard in my life, and learning about the history and what it takes to really like push forward and push past societal standards, or even like again coming from a Latin family, those standards that even come with you when you come to America, and having to break and retrain yourself. So it's definitely been an interesting journey, and definitely one that I'm still on. As you're saying, considering me a youth, I still for sure do. I don't feel like an adult, but it is quite a journey, and I'm excited to be on it.
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And I think something that I'm hearing consistently, and actually not just on this panel, but on the other panels that we've run in previous years, is the importance of chosen family and the people that you surround yourself with, and how beautiful that you have a mother that really nurtured that, right? Maybe out of necessity at the beginning, but which for me was the case also, right? Like I couldn't depend on my family because they were not even able to depend on themselves a lot of the time. And so I had to kind of just say my loyalty has to be to people, not to anyone, but like the way that I want to experience relationship is outside of just the bloodline, right? Like outside of just the people that are supposed to be there. And so thank you for kind of bringing that up at this point. I'm wondering, Cindy and Dallas, like what role has chosen family played for each of you as well, just on your journeys? And then did you have similar experiences where, you know, maybe a family member or family members of parents were not initially accepting and you kind of had to find chosen family out of necessity? Would either of you like to speak on that?
Yeah, I can go ahead and start. That's a really good question. So definitely chosen family. I didn't realize was a term until later on. As somebody who, quote unquote, is a late bloomer in their queer identity, I mean, you're never really late, right? But I came out later in life. I came out, I think, about at this point 2 or 3 years ago. First to my spouse, to my husband, and then later to friends, and just having that chosen family where I felt like I could open up about my identity was just such a relief. The one person that really was super accepting, and I didn't realize how much I needed that healing and acceptance from, was my younger sister. She's 12 years younger, so I have 2 younger siblings and we're each 6 years apart. It might sound cliche, but we literally were hiking and we went down to a river and I just felt like, again, nature was holding me and I was like, I gotta tell you something. And so just having that moment with her, and really I was able to release all that stuff, and her being able to hold me and say, I'm so glad that you're opening up. I can't even imagine what it's like for you to have held that on, or to have kept that in for so many years. It really gave me the confidence to be like, all right, like I'm safe now. I'm not that child that needed to be in the closet or had strange feelings about, like, why do I feel this way? Why am I constantly hearing a message about growing up around a religious family, specifically Pentecostalism, which is very much tied to Guatemala. My one side of my family is Guatemalan, the other side is Salvadorian. It was very much drilled into me about how just being queer or being a lesbian or being anything outside of straight was wrong. And so, that takes its toll on you. It takes a lot on your mental health and everything. But I do want to say that the chosen family piece, outside of my bloodline. I've had a really close friend for about 20 years at this point, who's also a gay man, and distance hasn't done anything for us to break that connection, and I think that's really special, and it's very rare. So we continuously cultivate and hold on to that, even if it's simply like sending each other memes or TikToks that make each other laugh across state lines. Has been really, really good, and I feel like has again given me that confidence to open up and share, and even be on this panel, right? Like I never thought as a kid that I would be able to speak and be open about my identity at this point. So it's very important to have chosen family.
Thank you so much. I relate so much to your story just as a big sister too. I may have shared this on a previous panel, and I identify as queer, and I've never come out like on the Latinx Parenting Instagram and said like, I'm queer, but in conversations like this, I do talk about it, right? And so I remember having the experience where, my sister told me that she was bi very early on, very, very early on. She was probably like 12 and I was like 22. And it was uncomfortable for me to receive it because in my family, it wasn't something that my family was open to or, welcoming of. And so I said, well, it's probably just a phase. Like, he'll get over it. I do not remember this conversation, but she really remembers this conversation, right? And so now that I'm kind of saying, like, I am also queer, she's like, well, do you remember when when I was 12? And and she's like, anyway, so those are conversations that we're having, but I saw her also kind of establish her chosen family because I was that family member that was telling her it's just a phase. Mind you, I'm over here uncomfortable in my queer feelings, right? Like having crushes on Cameron Diaz from The Mask and stuff like that. Like, I'm just like, oh, something's happening. But anyway, I wanted to give Dallas space also to kind of reflect on chosen family and what the role chosen family has played for you.
Yeah, chosen family was vital. I mean, I honestly think it's the reason why I'm still here today. Mentorship was critical. Being able to see yourself in other people that are at different stages of their life and not just as a peer was really important because we didn't see it in our own families. We didn't see it mainstream, media. Certainly weren't learning about it in schools. And so having chosen family that was LGBTQIA, it was super important for self-esteem, for educational purposes, to feel that sense of belonging and for affirmation. I mean, I ran away at 15 to avoid having to come out. And when I ran away, I already had chosen family in place that, housed me. Mind you, sometimes it was like couch to couch, floor to floor, but fed me, taught me what relationships were like and how beautiful queer relationships could be. And I still have those people on my side today. And I just want to remind everybody that nearly half of Native, Indigenous, queer youth have experienced homelessness. Almost a third of our Latinx siblings have experienced homelessness because of their identity as LGBTQ. So I think it's super important to have those connections with people if you don't have it in your own home. Family estrangement, loss of relationships, those are all part of the queer experience. And even if you have family that's accepting, even if you have relatives that still love you, that still support you, you still need to have visibility, representation somewhere. You still need to see yourself aging. You need to see what it would be like teenage years, early adult years. You need to see those things so that you have something to hold on to, right? Even if it's like you're never going to be exactly like that person, you still know that person made it. That person exists. That person's life matters. They are loved, right? They were able to do it. You have to have something to latch onto to have hope. Otherwise, it's a really isolating, lonely experience. And so I was always fortunate to have mentors on my side, role models, people willing to step in and say, hey, we'll take you under our wing. And that's what I try to do for folks coming in behind me and for my elders, because again, we go through these cycles where then as people age, starts to happen again. We have those lost relationships. We have those, disconnections with the community that we had. We're no longer going out, to the neighborhood. We're not going to the strip to go party. We're not going to Pride anymore. So where are we still getting that support and those connections?
That's a great question. I want to allow Sachin Jr. and Sinik to kind of respond to some of the things that you said, because I can see the wheels turning in their heads. And, Dallas is speaking on having this vision, right? And normally like this vision question comes at the end, but whatever, we're here. Having this vision of like what queerness could look like and having representations of that now more so definitely than when we were children, right? There's this, I forget what the movie is called, but it's about these like warriors that it just came out on Netflix. Help me if you know what I'm talking about. But at the end, there's like a kiss between the two main characters, the two male main characters. And my kids were watching it with their grandparents, who were very conservative, not my parents, but their grandparents were very conservative. And the grandma said, like, made a comment like, oh, that's interesting. Like, do we have to see that? And so my daughter and I had engaged in this conversation. And I said, do you think, if you're watching The Little Mermaid and Prince Eric and Ariel kissed at the end, like, would there have been a comment? Do we have to see this? And so I think, for our children who at this point in time, my children haven't identified as queer. That's obviously something that is open to happening, and I would be very supportive of that. But kind of giving them that representation, not just for themselves, but for anybody else around them that's outside the binary, the cis hetero binary. And so I'm wondering if, Cindy, Xochitl, and Junior, if you can speak on like the importance of having that representation, and how you've kind of seen that evolve, not just in media, but also seeing, older queer couples like Dallas is speaking on, and yeah, the importance of that and how you've seen that evolve.
Yeah, I think that representation, I have this artwork in my apartment that is a park scene with a tree and a bunch of queer couples. A lot of them are like gay, lesbian, but it, like, you wouldn't notice if you don't look at it closely. Like, it just looks like a scenery from people at the park. And I love that. When I saw that I bought it at Cal State Long Beach. When I saw that, it just, to me, it was so, like, it doesn't have to be, like, I want the queer community to see themselves without saying, like, everything's always so hard for us. Like, I understand the struggles, but I want it to be almost like where we don't even, like, notice it with all that pain that's attached to it, I was watching a couple movies and I love documentaries, but sometimes they're so emotional and gut wrenching. Like, it's hard for me to watch things, or people being thrown out because, sorry, that they're part of that community, and it's really hard for me to see stuff like that. So sometimes it's like, oh, I love this documentary. I'm glad it's out there. I can only watch it in pieces, and that's okay, But for me, especially right now too, as an educator, I'll do we'll do the Three Little Pigs, but I'll say, and then they lived in a house with their mother and their mother, and I'll just put it in the story somewhere, because I want them to know that, stories and things like that, it's just a part of, like, where it doesn't have to be this thing, or even when I talk, I have fantasies of writing all these like children's books, and I'm like, and I want the illustrator to put, same-sex, parents in there without it having to be about same-sex parents. Like, I just want it to be, and for me, that's where I feel like I'm striving to gear at least what I do, into that direction. I love reading with last, I guess, semester, I gave like my first like class on like social justice, and we talked about pronouns, and also that people can change pronouns, how I can choose something fits me today and tomorrow it doesn't fit me, or it can fit me an hour ago and it doesn't fit me anymore. And I want to, or at least I strive to normalize those kind of conversations with kids, right? Where it doesn't have to be about sex. People always talk about, oh, it's about sex. And it's like, it isn't, it's about the people's self-identity, and how can I create a safe space for people to do that. And even if I just put a sticker at least on my wall where my class is that says, this is a safe space where people can see that, and at least let a little bit of that guard down. And for me, that's really important. And I do love going to Pride Parade, and I love dressing up, and I love being out there every now and then, and then there's days that how we're saying, like, I'm not so in your face, but I do lately try to be more in people's faces, just because I'm like, I do want to make a stand, and I feel comfortable and safe to be able to do that. So.
Yeah, I think following what my mom was saying, like following with representation, I have a unique perspective being right, like a generation ahead. So I do think that there is a path where it is becoming more normalized. Um, there's still a lot of work to be done, like my mom was saying, like sometimes it's like they're gay just to be gay, or like they're queer just to be queer, and it's like there's a lot more depth to character that should be put into that. Like it's not just about their identity, it's about who they are as a person.
Mhm.
But I do think that there's definitely a path in my generation where it is more normalized, and there is all this work that has been done by the past generations that's now bearing its fruit. And I'm able to you know I don't want to say take advantage of it, but like see it and appreciate it. um, and I think too, in terms of representation, like I didn't even really know my mom was queer until maybe high school. And she had just mentioned she had gone to the gay bar and was like having like a couples night, and being bisexual in one of those like environments. Or even like when I got into high school, like she started dating another woman, and coming from like right the social justice and like the communities that I was around, it's very normalized. So even when she told me, I was like, oh, okay, cool. And again, I think that it's important to be in those environments where again it's just like another part of your identity, and you can like we're saying, say it loud and proud, or you can just be a little more conservative about it, because it's your identity, you can do whatever you want with it. It was funny talking about involving it within like kids teachings. I remember my mom, I think this is when you were at preschool, but I think she brought a story about Harvey Milk to class, and she told me that the parents started like complaining. They're like, "Oh, like it's a sexual thing, like," and it's like that's not his story. Like his story, involves that, but it's very much more than that. And she was getting flack from the parents about having like a gay man involved in the story she was reading. And I remember thinking like she's saying, like it's not a sexual thing. It's just another form of identity, and I think it's moments like that too where we can pass it on to the next generation and make it more normalized. Um, even with resistance from some older generations, or other people who aren't as accepting. But I do definitely think it's something that needs to be pushed forward. And like we're saying, for other like queer people, it is important to be seen, to be heard, and to be represented in different types of media.
Yeah, thank you. I saw Maria had quoted you in the chat, said it's your identity, you can do whatever you want with it. And I think that this is a question of autonomy, right? And queerness and fluidity. And so I think, Cindy, this would be really great to hear from you, because I know that you focus a lot on sexual autonomy and just kind of taking back that power, right? That I feel like a lot of these systems have taken from us in terms of our identity and our autonomy. So I would love for you to speak on that.
Yeah, because I do teach about gender, sexuality, and sexual health, and intimacy. Representation is huge. For me personally, being Central American, parents of immigrants, I mean, a child of immigrants. I still don't see a lot of LGBTQ plus Central American folks, especially not Guatemalans. Guatemala and El Salvador have really what's it called? I can't think of the word right now, but their laws are very, very strict as far as like how you can identify and what you can do, and the topic of reproductive justice and what rights you have with your body and what you can do. So it's huge for me to be more out and choose to be out every day, right? And have that representation. Now as a tia, a lot of my nibblings, nieces and nephews, for them it's so easy to come out, and I love that, right? Because I'm like, oh, I love that now for them it's been a little bit more normalized, versus for my generation it was still hard. It was still like, my family is going to reject me, and that is huge. And I think to Dallas's point earlier, family rejection is such a big harmful thing, whether it's overt or covert. Just that threat and that harm of my family's not going to accept me is huge, and takes its toll on mental health and, you know, the safety of a person. So representation for me is really important. I've had several of, actually at this point, I think I've had about 3 of my nibblings who have come out to me, which was great. And I felt like, okay, I can finally be that adult that I needed growing up, you know? And it's great. And I love that they can express themselves with me, and they're like, I want to explore more of my style, and I can do that with them. And we can talk about dressing up to go watch the Barbie movie, and I'll do all that fun stuff, all that cool, like Dia things that I had growing up. And I love that, right? Also on top of that, just for me, the representation is important too, because you know, indigenous communities, that sexuality and diversity in sexuality in the spectrum has always existed. And I think that for a lot of our communities, Latinx communities, the religious aspect plays a huge role in erasing that. So part of my what I'm rooted in is making sure that I keep in touch with that, because I do see a lot the older generation kind of, you know, rooting themselves in that belief system, but how it's done such a great job at erasing what continues to exist and has always existed, which is the diversity of identities.
Yes, I fully agree. And it's such a tricky conversation because you want to honor the autonomy of people's belief systems also. And yet we have this privilege that, you know, where we can look at the history, right? And we can say, like, this is where the Spanish came in, or, you know, the colonizers came in and told us that it had to be done this way. And in my work, I have to kind of communicate, like, even getting to that point of understanding the history, number one, is a privilege because we have the education to be able to understand that context. And number two, we're not necessarily trying to overwhelm anybody with the reality is what it is, right? And so we have to do, as educators, I think, you know, and just people kind of existing in relationship to our families, we have to be very gentle kind of in that process too, right? Just as we would want that to be done gently for us. So, you know, what has been something that has made impact in doing that, right? Just with the religious question of how do we have those conversations, right, with people who are like, nope, this is just bad. Like, this is just not what you do. I remember driving with my mom. I probably mentioned this in a previous panel, but I remember driving with my mom and I was telling her that I wanted a midwife. I was in high school and I wanted to say, when I have a baby, I want to have a midwife. And the way that it came out was in Spanish, I said, cuando tenga un niño or cuando tenga un bebé, quiero que me lo haga una mujer. And what she understood was, when I have a baby, I want it to be from a woman, right? And she was like, like, she freaked out in that moment. I was like, okay, thank you for showing me that if that were something that I did want, like that would not be safe, right? And so, and I've never been able to have, because I'm doing it very delicately and very slowly, having these conversations with her. But what has been something that you have seen or that you have experienced in having those difficult conversations and in asking to be seen by people who maybe are still rooted in what Cindy's talking about, you know, that religious dogma or just more narrow ways of viewing sexuality? And I'll let anybody who feels called to answer.
I think to your point, Leslie, the little baby steps, you know, like just asking questions, like I'll do it something, you know, I think within our community too, appearance is a huge thing, right? Like body image and weight and all that. It was interesting because my grandfather, who was actually pretty sick, I went to visit him, and he was he brought up, he was like, "That's puesto gorda," you know, like
Mhm.
the very normal thing, right? Unfortunately, that those things have been normalized. And in the past, I would have brushed it off and been like, it's just like old people things, nunca va a cambiar, you know, all that stuff. He's never going to change his mind. He's set in his ways. But, you know, I really told myself, I said, you know, and I brought it up. I said, ¿sabe qué, abuelito? Lo que usted me dijo me dolió. You know, what you told me, that really hurt me. And he's like, sí, ya sé. Like, as soon as I said it, I knew that that was wrong. But it was interesting because he was trying to still say it, but like in a nicer way. He was like, okay, mejor decir gordita. And I was like, how about instead of focusing on people's appearances, let's not do that. Let's just, we don't have to focus on that. And he's like, okay. So like little things like that, it's honestly just teaching them that, hey, you know, there's other ways we can relate to each other. And I think it's really hard, but the fact that this 80 something year old man who's very much still rooted in machismo could hear me and we could have that conversation, I was like, okay, that's huge. Because I know had it been maybe 50 years back, it probably wouldn't have been that way. But so those little things I think are really important and show little changes. I don't expect that, you know, on his deathbed he's gonna be like, oh my god, like I understand the world is like different and all this stuff. But I think those little changes, those tiny wins make a huge difference, because it makes him feel good too, that he's like not treating me badly, or you know, because I think a lot of times, as frustrating as it is, I know that my grandfather is not coming from a malicious place, or our elders aren't coming from a malicious place. I think they just live in a different reality and had different things, and society didn't accept certain things when they were young, right? And so just being able to have a conversation and say, hey, look, I'm offering you a different perspective, um, gives him the confidence to in saying like, oh, okay, like I know that I can make a mistake and I'm not going to be reprimanded for it, which is huge, because I think I didn't even grow up in that environment, so it shows me that how much growth I've gone through that. So yeah, just like little things like that for sure.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's really beautiful that he was able to be receptive to that. And I think you're right that 50 years ago, that conversation probably would not have happened. So we are making those small dents. But I would love for Dallas and Sochi and Junior to also speak on this piece of just kind of moving through the family dynamics and what has been supportive, what is something, you know, that encourages you about this. And he just shared something that I find very encouraging, right? It's like, okay, we're making some progress, and yet we still have a lot of work to do. So I wanted to open it up to Dallas and Junior and Sochin as well.
Yeah, I think that in my experience, and what has been working has been challenging ideas and concepts. And so even from a young age, you know, I remember no longer going to church, probably at the age of 8 or 9. And in my memories, you know, to my recollection, I think that I remember us kids, you know, my brother and I, just kind of always combating the idea of having to go and sit in this place, you know, every week, be spoken to, and not be a part of a process, right? There's no real dialogue that's happening. And then coming out feeling like we had so many questions, you know, like why are we doing this? What was that conversation about? You know, is there another way that we could have received that information? Like, if you know, do you know, as parents, do you know why you're asking us to do what we're doing as a family? What's the objective? And I think just constantly, you know, pushing that idea of like, it's okay to question, it's okay to challenge ideas and concepts, and doing that to the point where we stopped going to church. And after we stopped going to church, there was no more religion talked about. No one ever brought religion in the house. We didn't say grace before meals. We didn't, nobody was preaching to each other. And so it was like, what happened? Right? Like, what were we trying to gain from that? Was there any loss from that? I didn't feel any loss, but I can tell you that it made me think creatively about how we can still design our moral compass. What are other ways that guide us? Where are we getting our principles and values, our belief systems? And because I wasn't getting a whole lot of direction from my direct relatives, the people that spent the most time with me day in and day out, I was having to start to develop those things on my own. And what's really interesting is, me challenging things, me always asking questions, asking for more information, that has carried on through today. Now I'm an attorney, makes sense. But also my kids see that. And so when I'm challenging somebody else and when I'm asking for more information or clarification, or what's the objective of this? Is there another way we could be doing things? My kids are seeing that. And now I'm watching my son do it, which for me is a beautiful thing. Watching my son challenge his teachers, challenge me, challenge people that don't agree, with things. And it's a beautiful thing because I just know that if my kids can stand up and ask why or ask for more information, like for me, like that's the first step in making change, and identifying maybe where change needs to be made. So religion, had a huge influence in the beginning. It had a huge influence on all of my lineage, my parents. But I think if we could ask my parents, if we could ask my grandparents why they're doing what they're doing, what it actually means to them, like at least in my experience, it's just because of what they did. You know what I'm saying? It's what my parents did. So this is what we do. And I think some of our traditions, some of our culture, some of our, ancestors' lived experiences, some of those things, yes, they do need to keep being pushed on. We do need to keep carrying that on. But then there are other parts where it's just like, do we really need this? Is it serving a purpose? So.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about chancla culture, right? It's just what we do. Like, it's just how we raise kids. I had this question for my dad not that long ago, and I said, "Why did you send me to Catholic school my whole life? That did some stuff to me. Not all bad, right? Everything has shadow and light." And he literally said what you just said. He said, "It's just what we did. It's just what you would do. That's what you would want for your kids. You would want them to be raised in the same traditions and values, and they were able to do that. So that's just what they did." And that was really interesting for me because I really expected some kind of like meteor response, something juicy, like, well, I really, Jesus and whatever, like something like at least just name drop Jesus in there or something. But he was just like, I don't know. We just did that. So thank you, Dallas, for naming that. And Sachit, I know that you also wanted to contribute in junior as well.
Oh, that's some good stuff. Good stuff, everyone. Yeah, I'm trying to think, like I said, being raised by my grandmother who was very traditional, and we all went, to Catholic school and not Catholic school, catechism on the weekends, and church, being raised Catholic. Some things were just right and some things were wrong, and I said, how I was saying, being very traditional and also catering, right? For me, like I was saying, like I loved school, and I remember coming home really excited about my grades because I had, A's. Now when I look at the grades, I'm like, anyways, that's a whole nother story. But just even like being proud of myself. And I remember coming home and showing my grandmother, who was, my mother figure on my end. And I remember her saying like, ¿Y para qué quieres eso? Like, what's that for? Like, what's the point? Are you going to support your husband? It was very much like shut down. And I remember that self-pride that I felt was like, oh, it's insignificant, you know? And I think for me, a lot of growing up for me, I think, I don't know, I feel like I took a lot of time away from my family. It wasn't until Junior was in high school where he was like, where is this extended family of ours? You know? And I was like, you're right. Like, you don't know my primos, and you don't know like my aunts and uncles. And of course, that was by choice. But now, as a high schooler, I'm like, you can make those choices yourself, and I can take you and not stay. Like, sometimes I forget that I have a choice too, you know? And I think that now for me, you know, you've all talked about like saying something to extended family, and I'm like, I don't know if I feel like I can, you know. Even I remember, like Junior was saying, when I was dating my ex and making the decision to go to a birthday party and making a decision for us to go together was very, very scary. um you know, and I had been out for years, you know, but to my family that hadn't seen that, or that I hadn't had as much relationship with, um was scary. And I remember going, and you know, I just didn't say anything. I just said, oh, hola, you know, this is her and this is me, and that was it. It wasn't this big old, again, I didn't make a thing out of it. I just said, this is this, and everybody was like, okay, and that was it, you know? And then the second time we went to a second family party, it was a little easier. But I remember feeling like, for me, and this was maybe like 4 years ago, like for me, that was my coming out to my family. And I remember how proud I was of myself, and that I didn't let that fear, you know, really take me back. Um, but I think that we get to choose, or hopefully as adults we get to choose what feels safe for us. And if that means cutting ties with certain people that are unhealthy or that do not make you feel safe, that's okay too. You know, and there's a lot of like, pues es tu familia, or, you know, with me, like I said, having experienced sexual abuse, and people in my family telling like, well, how far did it go? And then I can tell you if you should forgive or not, you know, or tell me, you know, this is your family member, like you need to forgive them. And I said, you know, that's not where I'm at. Like, there's still a lot of pain, and there's still a lot of healing that I have to go through for myself. I am not okay with just accepting this person back into my life, and I'm choosing not to, you know. And so I think for me, a lot of the reparenting, those soft reparentings, has come from myself, you know, and my therapist, and you know, my social support networks of saying like, it's okay for you to be scared in this situation, you know, and it's okay for us to go lay down and sleep for 3 hours if that's what we need at this point. You know, and if we can get back out there, then we do. But yeah, I guess that's my piece on that.
I think it's really important that you name that, like, and we started off thinking about our inner children, but I think it's important that you've just named that it's okay to protect that inner child. You know, it's okay to tell her, or them or him, like, it's okay to not have a relationship with this person. It's okay to create that boundary. I think that's so hard for us as a collectivist culture. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking on, Sochi, that there's so many people that would encourage you to forgive prematurely, would encourage you to say, well, that's just our family. And again, a lot of times we relied on blood family, and we had to overlook some of the things that hurt us because of the need to survive, because of the conditions that have been placed on us systemically. And now we're at a point, right, in this generation where we don't necessarily have to operate on survival as much. And that's such a great thing. And we thank our ancestors, and we thank our elders for the sacrifices that they had to make. My mom didn't really have an adolescence. You know, she had to work right away. She had to migrate when she was 14 and start working. So she didn't really have a high school experience, right? And so I can be grateful for that. And I can also say, I don't want to suffer like that. And you also don't want me to suffer in that way. it might make you uncomfortable to see me not suffering as much as you've suffered, like that's something that has come up as well, is like, well, why do you get to be the liberated one? Like, I wanted to be the liberated one. It's like, well, I'm trying to do this for all of us, like as we kind of step into our truth and our identity and our power, like we're doing this not just for us and not just for our children, right? Not just for Junior, but so that Junior could also be that template that maybe we didn't have when we were that age. And so would anyone kind of like to speak on that cultural piece, the collectivism piece, and anything else that you might want to share? And I do, just before I turn it over to everybody, I want to remind people that you do have the ability to ask questions in the Q&A, and we're going to spend the last 15 minutes or so answering those questions that you send. So I encourage y'all to kind of think about what you might want to ask either panelists or all panelists, and then start dropping those in now, so that by the time we're 15 minutes out from closing, we can start reading those off. So yeah, Dallas, Cindy, Xochitl, Junior, anything to add from what we have been sharing?
Yeah, I just want to say that everybody here, Dallas and Xochitl, I think what I'm finding the common thread here is getting back to what autonomy is, and it's really understanding the power of no. And that's huge, because the power of just saying no is literally you putting yourself first and saying yes to yourself and putting your safety first and what works. And I think because we come from such a collectivist community, we find that that's people within that don't understand, that didn't grow up with boundaries, it's seen as a threat. It's seen as like, you don't love me because you don't allow me to not basically like infiltrate and like, not have boundaries. And there's a lot of enmeshment with that. But I think it's important to relearn and reteach ourselves and our elders and future generations that the power of no is huge. And it's important for our well-being as a collective community and as individuals within that community too, because it's just important. I mean, I don't know how much more I can emphasize it. I think it's just there's people who have been silenced, who never got the opportunity, like you mentioned, Leslie, to speak up and say no, or like, I'm not comfortable with that, or forgiveness for me looks like this. It doesn't have to look how you're telling me. It doesn't have to come from a religious text. It looks like this for me. And I can say that even within my own personal experience, I do have estranged relationships with my parents, and that's been really hard. But also there's so much freedom that has come with that, as an adult, and navigating that, and understanding too that I think when we're young, we are taught that we are responsible for maintaining that connection with these people. And we're not taught that it's really a two-way street. And then what are the things the other person is doing that's showing me that, okay, I am safe. I can be a little bit more vulnerable, or I want this person to be a part of my life. I think that takes time, and it takes a lot of learning too. And that's okay. That's completely okay. I think that when we set those boundaries, it's an opportunity for other people to either reflect on, okay, this person doesn't want me in their life. Why? What's going on? Do I want to be a part of their life? And then how do I get there? And then some people don't get there. And I think that that's okay, right? We're all on a different place and a different journey. And for me, it's been really relieving ourselves from that burden of, I have to be the glue that keeps every relationship together. It's too much. It's overbearing, it's overwhelming, and it takes it consumes so much of your energy.
Thank you, Cindy. Dallas, would you like to add anything to this point?
No, I think Cindy spoke really eloquently
Yeah.
on that piece.
Yeah. There's a lot to hold. And I think, you know, as we're kind of moving through and navigating relationships, it has become more normalized to create boundary. It has become more normalized to you know, speak the language of the inner child and to protect that inner child and to kind of see ourselves as a life as a lifetime, right? I feel like that's what it is. It's just like I have to see myself in the context of my ancestry and also what I'm building in the future. And so my question before we move into Q&A is, what is your vision, I guess, for families? You know, what is your vision for families who might be tuning in who have children that identify as LGBTQIA plus? I know Dallas, the you had added Two-Spirit to that acronym as well, and I had never seen that, so thank you so much for that. We change it every year. I think we're like, oh, let's shift and kind of adjust, but I would love to hear just what your vision is for families who either, you know, parents themselves are queer or navigating their identity and the complexity of that, or their children's identities and the complexity of that. So what is your vision kind of, and then how do we get there?
Yeah, I think that my hope and my vision is that queer folks experience family and family success determined by their own definition of that. And so if that means having children, great. If that means honor and uplifting the children around them, fantastic. If it's through whatever means, if it's from caring and uplifting and empowering their inner child and reparenting, you know, if that's what it means to queer folks. Because I think so much of us have so much loss and are still kind of trying to figure things out. I think a lot of us have greater delays because we didn't have anybody modeling what a queer relationship, whether it's gay, lesbian, you know, in my experience, you know, I first came out as a lesbian, not understanding what trans was, not knowing what transition was about. And now that I'm an adult and transitioning, I am trans mask, you know, I identify as a trans individual. I no longer really use the term that I'm a lesbian, but I knew all along that I wanted to have children and I wanted to have kids. And early on, I didn't know how that was going to happen. You know, it never in a million years did I even think that we were going to get the rights to marry somebody of the same sex. And so in high school, I was already making pacts with a best friend who was a gay cis male, like how we're going to make this happen, how we're going to create family and still be able to carry on things and still be able to have things like health benefits, be able to afford a house. You know, I was doing this with a best friend, right? Because never did I think that I could do this on my own the way that I wanted to. And so I think for me, my vision is letting people know, you know, and affirming people's beliefs in what family is and what family success is. And then once that is identified, just helping cultivate that and helping keep that safe and secure for those people. So whether it's people in my nonprofit organization, whether it's people in my family, people in community, people in this space right now, that's my hope and vision.
Thank you so much, Cindy Sachi Jr.
No, I think Dallas spoke perfectly. You know, I think that you have to determine what success looks like for your family and then take the steps forward to do that. And some of those steps are hard and painful. And but just know that, you know, there's so many unknown stories of LGBTQ plus IA families that are successful and they look like a variety of combinations, right? And that's the beautiful thing about it is, for me, I never had a desire to have children. And once I accepted that for myself, I was like, oh, well, then my family can look like this, and I can choose to do this, and I can focus on, um, you know, parenting can look a different way. You know, right now I'm helping raise a 6-year-old child, my niece, you know, and what that looks like and how much of an influence I have and all of that. And that's beautiful. And I love that journey for us because then she's going to grow up and see that, oh, okay, there's a different way that I can choose to have my family growing up. And so it can all be successful. You can own a home if you want to, work toward that. You can travel the world. It can look like all sorts of things. And I just want people to learn what that's going to make them feel good and happy in life and choose that every day and go toward it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think one of the things that I kind of came into as I came into my own queerness in the last 3 years, and similar to you, Cindy, like I had initially come out to my husband about 3 years ago, and it wasn't, you know, a super like momentous conversation. I was just like, this is something that I am. But I feel like coming into that has really allowed for me to understand what you're saying when it comes to like family could be anything, right? Family could be, we started off the conversation talking about chosen family. My daughter made a sign for our living room that's like flags hanging down that says family forever. And she did that before my husband and I ended up separating, but that sign is still up, you know? And so the conversations that we're having is we're still family. It's just different, right? It just looks different. And different is okay. Different is expansive, you know, kind of moving into a different idea of what family is something that is beneficial for all of us to you know, to expand into that. And so I think that that's very aligned with queerness, right? Like queerness is about not being in those rigid binaries, right? Not being in like, this is exactly what family should look like. This is, and those are all from conservative values and you know, religion and white supremacy and things that like would perpetuate those systems, you know, to continue keeping us in those boxes. But I just feel very affirmed, I think, by what you and Dallas have shared so far, in terms of, yeah, just kind of expanding into what can family look like, you know, what are familias actually, and who gets to define that, right? Who gets to define that? So with that, I want to move on to Xochitl. I wanted to say Sempa Xochitl. But what is your vision for Familias, and Junior you as well?
Yeah, I think that, you know, continuing that self-discovery, it's a lifelong journey. You know, I think sometimes it's like that question, what do you want to be when you're in the, you know, grown up? And it's like, we're always shifting. There's 1,000 things that I am now and that I get to be, you know, later. And I think that how can we continue to support people going through their own process? And I think sometimes too, I always tell parents, like, it's okay for you to not know, right? As a parent, for me, as a teacher, like, you know, when kids are always looking at me for the answers, it's okay that I don't have the answer. And I can tell you, I do not have the answer. And I'm going to look into that, you know, and if I can't Google it, you know, there's community that I can ask. You know, we talk about things or experiences that we haven't had that I don't know how to add to, in terms of, you know, if my child was part of the queer community, and let's say I wasn't, then how do I, right? Like there's the LGBTQ center here in Long Beach, and there's places that I can go to and ask and build community. And again, people, there's so much information out there too, that sometimes, you know, even as we talked, when I talk with other parents about like certain parenting philosophies, and then they choose one and they're so rigid about that one. And I'm like, it's okay to pick and choose, and it's okay to shift. And I think sometimes for me, that's been, right, growing up, everything was black or white. You're either going to do this or this, but it's one or the other. And I think as I've gotten older, it's this mesh and these waves and ebb and flows of different things, and how that's okay. And I think for me, that's been the biggest, maybe one of my biggest like light bulb moments, is I can shift and I can be halfway through something and pause. Like, who knew I could pause and reroute? I think for me, those are like big things that I've come to. But I think, how I'm saying, just being honest with ourselves, being honest with our children. Yeah, I think for me, it's just also like, how do we preserve our magic? Are we authentic to ourselves? And even with my kiddos, as an educator and being with different kids, for me, it's always like, they come with so much magic. How do I provide a space so we can cultivate that, as opposed to taking that away and creating who I think is this ideal human being, because it's not up to me.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just telling my mom, I think this is more a y'all space. I don't really know what I'm doing exactly. So I just want to, open the floor to you guys. You guys have been saying a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure also, Junior, that there's people that are, that you're in connection with or friendship with, that maybe don't have the kind of parent that you have, right? That is like so intentional. And so maybe we can think about, what is your hope, I guess, for some of that youth and their families?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I mean, just in my life, my mom has been very free range in a lot of aspects of her teachings and parenting style, which I've heard other people's family dynamics, and I'm just like, what? Like, I mean, I think even to like asking to go out, so I would tell my mom, I'm going out, I'll be back at this time, I'm going here. But then there's always the, going out with who, going out, I was never asked all those questions. And I know some parents, do kind of interrogate their child on that kind of sense. But I guess I think a big concept that we've been, touching on tonight is just being more open, being, inviting to different ideas. And I think that is my hope, that we continue forward, a bit more open-minded.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. We did have a question for you, Junior, also that came in. Do you, and I think I know the answer, but I'm going to let you answer. Do you identify as a queer youth yourself?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you. And then we did have one question come in. It's kind of a long one, but I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud. And then if anybody feels like they want to jump in to respond to it, and then we're going to be closing after that with just you sharing and how we find you. How do we reach out to you? How do we connect with you? How do we support you? So let me go ahead and read this question. Has anyone heard of our developed language to explain to a young child about a non-binary gender identity as they're noticing gender expression and learning about biological sex traits? My 4-year-old niece has been asking now several times, what are you, Titi? Are you a boy or a girl? And she's expressing confusion based on my gender expression as well, as she notices my body, no top surgery, so she's noticing my chest is like her mom's. She doesn't seem to be taking I'm neither or there's not just boy and girl as an answer. I've tried to go a bit deeper and saying the chest she's noticed doesn't mean I'm a girl, but that caused confusion too. She's wanting to go deeper, and I'm struggling to find language that doesn't get too confusing because she's so young. Her parents have also tried to explain in very simple terms, but they are struggling to find an explanation she will accept as well.
I know that the person said that the 4-year-old wasn't accepting I'm neither, but I'm a huge advocate for reading and literature and starting at a really young age, and how helpful that can be. So I just want to put a resource out there. There's actually a kid's book called Neither, a story about being who you are. And it uses animals and colors and all of that to kind of explain in simpler terms for a young mind to understand non-binary concepts and how different things can exist in this world, which I think nature has always shown us anyway. So I do want to recommend that book. That could be helpful.
Thank you so much. I just put in some ground. I don't know why I did that. Thank you, Cindy. We're also going to include any resources that have been dropped in the chat in the post-event email. And so if there's anything else that you would want to send out to participants that either attended or did not attend, that would be wonderful. But I wanted to allow, either Dallas or Xochitl, what would you respond to that?
That's still on the question regarding the non-binary person and the 4-year-old. I would say, doing this work is a process, and it's hard when you don't have the people that are closest to the child helping and doing the work along the way, because you take it in chunks and you can dive in deeper into these things as kids get older, as it's more developmentally appropriate. So it's kind of hard to judge where this 4-year-old is. This 4-year-old is probably completely different than where my 4-year-old was. Right. But I will say that real life examples really helped my kiddo, being able to point out like real life scenarios and people and dynamics, whether it was myself, the people around us. I mean, I know, one of the things that I always turn to is, doing some people watching and observation and noticing characteristics about people and body types and how all bodies are different. And that kind of goes with what we read about in the books, because the books are a great place to start. But like I said, you want to do these things in progression. And so, oftentimes we do a lot of observation and people watching and comparisons with like friends, families, how other relationships are, how other dynamics are, how other people's characteristics come about. How some people assigned female at birth have facial hair, how some people assigned male at birth have larger and more breast tissue than, some, folks that are assigned female at birth. I mean, even before my top surgery, I was smaller chested. There were men, cisgender men out walking in the world with more breast tissue than I had. So, right, there's like, our bodies are so different. There is no, type A, type B, like it's not like that. We don't fit in these boxes. If we look really closely, we see that. Like, don't be fooled by what society has taught us, that we're these binary things. And so I think with 4-year-olds and smaller kids, I think real life examples of like, why does grandma have a beard? Like, yeah, like, oh, why does Theo have, lots of breast tissue? Like, like, get real with it. If kids can see these like things right in front of them, like, oh, right. And it's not what people are making it out to be. It's not just male and female. We don't all fit in these pretty little boxes. We're not the little pictures on the outside of the restrooms, right? That's not the reality of it. And I always appreciate transparency and reality, and that's the way I've raised my kids. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I had this experience where I joined Xochitl for our friend Anelia's birthday a few months ago at the Korean spa, and it was my first time. And I was like, wow, look at all these bodies. I was just like, this is so cool. And do you remember Xochitl? There was a little girl there. She was probably like 10 years old, and I was like, how beautiful that is that this child gets to experience, this array of difference in body type. And I was just like admiring these women. I was just like, wow, like it was amazing. And I didn't even know that had existed a few years back. So thank you so much, Dallas, for that, because and I think something that you mentioned that was so important is that this is a progressive thing, right? So it's like, okay, at 4, maybe it's confusing, but over time with consistency, like this is going to be something that's normalized. And 14 isn't going to be 4 anymore, 24 isn't going to be 14. And so I'm thinking about that lifespan again, and just knowing that consistency is super important. So thank you so much for that. So I know that we're at time, but I want to get space for each of you to let us know where we can find you. We're also going to send out your details in the post-event email. In the meantime, I'm gonna pull up the screen that I have. I do want to encourage people to take advantage of a bundle that we have going on. We talked about inner child work. We also talked about decolonized parenting, nonviolent parenting. And so we're offering anybody who signed up for the panel basically a two for one, where you can get an intro to the reparenting work and then an intro to decolonized nonviolent parenting. So I'm going to show that in a little bit, but I wanted to just, ask all of you, how can we reach you? How can we stay in contact with you? And how can we support you?
You can find me on Instagram. I'm on all of the social media platforms. It's Pleasure to People. That's the handle that I work through and I guess represent as online. I'm now on Threads. That's a new thing and it's a lot of fun over there. So if you want to be on Threads, go ahead and follow me. And I do different workshops. I do adult workshops and I do youth workshops as well, on a variety of topics. It can be skills-based sexual health education, or it can be communication and skill building. So you can find that, and I have my website all linked through the social media network. So I hope to see you there, and thank you again.
Thank you, Cindy, Dallas, Sachi, and Junior.
Yeah. So if you're looking for legal resources in the state of Washington that have to do with queer civil rights, you can find me at Q Law Foundation. I'm the legal director there. Otherwise, I founded a nonprofit that's really focused on creating queer intergenerational spaces. And so right now we do some discussions online, the second and the fourth Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can go to spectrumresourcecenter.org and get the info there. I'd love to share a link with you and you can join us in discussions. I'm also on Instagram at Dallas in Seattle WA. WA is for Washington. So Dallas in Seattle WA. And you can keep in touch with me there.
Thank you, Dallas. Sachi and Junior.
I am also a lot on Instagram. So XB Spanish and More is the name of my business. Also have a website, XB Spanish and More, Square site. And then, yeah, I do, right now I'm doing like summer programs, summer camp, just a 2-day summer camp. Usually on Saturdays, I do like a year-round Saturday class for littles. And it's been a while, but I was doing adult play dates, which was healing for our inner child. So I would just bring activities that I do with the kiddos for adults for us to do and just spend some, it was usually every 6 weeks, doing stuff out of clay. And then in the fall, I'll be doing some more Parent and Me classes and another class around social justice. And just, I do a lot with homeschoolers, so a lot on social and emotional development, but those two would be my top ones, Instagram and this website.
I'm not doing anything crazy right now. I just came here to provide another perspective, and I'm thankful that I was asked to be here. So
thank you. We're so grateful that you were here also, and I think your perspective is super valuable. So I'm just grateful to have you all creating this blueprint, each of you creating this blueprint of what family could look like, of what liberation could look like in your own way, from the smallest, more personal, interpersonal to the greater systemic. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen just so that everybody can see that you are able to access these two resources basically half off. And I hope that you take advantage of it. There's a lot of, somebody had asked about language, right? And kind of like, how do we talk to kids about this? And I think that the Decolonized Nonviolent Parenting framework offers a lot of that because it's rooted in nonviolence, right? And so we talk about needs, we talk about centering feelings and recentering a child's humanity, and the Criándome, Cuidándome, the reparenting is about centering our own humanity, our own childhood experiences. And so I do hope that everybody takes advantage of that. I want to say thank you so much to our panelists, to Cindy, to Dallas, to Xochitl, and to Junior. I want to say thank you to Maria and my team for being in the chat in the background, just dropping the links. I know that Maria was like furiously dropping links, so thank you so much. And then last but definitely not least, to the Lorenias, my interpreters who have been with me for like the last 3 years. And so they're doing this out of the goodness of their heart. And so shout out to these powerful, wonderful women. I hope that they're interpreting this and smiling as they're interpreting this. But thank you all so much for being here. And thank you to the audience and to the people that made it out today. And to those of you that are watching the recording, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to sign us off with some music and everybody can sign off on their own time. So thank you so much, Cindy, Dallas, Xochitl, and Junior, and everybody else.
Vale